das heißen. Das ist ja zuerst so eine gewaltige Welt gewesen. Damals. Ja, ja, das ist wurscht gewesen. Das war wahrscheinlich. Wieder mal ein bisschen anders. Das ist mir schon zu wenig.
This is the tale of a mountain mystery. It is rumored that a jet-black crystal is hidden deep inside this mountain, gathering and guiding its gigantic forces. Its peak is sometimes cloaked into a silence that reminds of long-lost innocence. Stories of daily miracles are told by the plants and animals inhabiting the cracks and crevices of this reserved and quick-tempered giant. This is also the story of a colossal challenge. For 200 years, humans have climbed the flanks of Großglockner. Some have met triumph, others tragedy. Glockner's peak rises above the Austrian Alps with such prominence that it has become a symbol of national identity. An air of legend and mystery surrounds this mountain. Lined with mysterious places and unsolved secrets, countless paths lead up to Glockner, all meeting at the same magic point, the summit of the Black Mountain. Many believe they know this mountain, but a journey through the seasons will reveal new and surprising angles. Late in the year, fogs rise early and tend to linger. The eagle is searching for live quarry before the snows force it to scavenge. It senses the approach of winter, which will soon begin its 6-month-long rule. The marmot takes a last turn in the open before going underground to hibernate. Its body temperature will drop to less than 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Its heart will slow to 2 or 3 beats per minute. The bridal veil near Kalth is falling silent. The river's ramifications freeze into a fantastic sculpture. At 12,461 feet, Großglockner is Austria's highest peak. Its core consists of hard green chlorite, which is surrounded by a mantle of slate. The Glockner Massif rises just south of the Alps' main ridge. The ridge is straddled by Hohe Tauern National Park, a 700 square mile protected area that reaches into Salzburg, Carinthia and Tyrol. More than 300 major peaks and 70 square miles of glaciers characterize this alpine wilderness at the heart of Europe's largest natural reserve. The eagle has returned to its nest. Although the sun is still high, cold gusts begin to whip up the snow. The harsh beauty of Glockner's steep flanks and sheer drops are brought out in the play of light and shade. In grim peace, the mountain stands motionless. Then, out of nowhere, a gigantic avalanche breaks. These are the alpine pastures of Apriach, near Heiligenblut, a hidden plateau high above the river Möhl. The largest larch forests of the Austrian Alps stretch across Großglockner's foothills. The timber of these century-old trees is rich in resin, which makes it extremely durable and ideal for roof shingles and boat planks. Timber harvesters have to make do without machines. This terrain requires horses and hands. The good straight logs are hauled to the nearest road. Local sawmills cut them into material for fences, barns and roofing. In summer, the Glockner Alpine Road is the lifeline between the mountain and civilization. In winter, it succumbs to masses of snow. "8,000 feet above sea level, 15-ton monsters struggle against the snow. Rotation plows invented by Alfred Wallach, the architect of the Glockner Road. Devouring the snow, they throw it over a distance of 40 yards. Clearing 25 miles of mountain road takes 40 days. The height of the snow in avalanche areas is sometimes more than 40 feet. The Teichnitzsch Valley is still buried in snow, but winter is on the wane. The ice is melting, even ice that is called eternal. This is Austria's largest glacier, the Pasterze. For decades it has been shrinking summer after summer. The ibex have spent most of the winter up here. Lower down the snow is too deep to find food, but here on the ridges the wind sweeps the sparse pastures clean. Now the ibex soak in the first warm rays of spring. Folk medicine had seen magic healing powers in ibex horns and other body parts, the reason why ibex were hunted to extinction in almost the entire Alps. Since 1960, ibex have been reintroduced to the Hohe Tauern range. Various small herds now live in the safety of the national park. They appreciate steep, rocky slopes on the sunny side of the mountains. Here the snow soon slides down, exposing lichen and patches of herbs and grass. This buck is gathering strength for the approaching mating season and the fights with its rivals. Nearby, the Glockner region's most popular inhabitants are emerging. They live in sprawling subterranean dens. Marmots have clearly defined territories at an altitude between 4,000 and 8,000 feet. As soon as a stranger enters such a territory, he is challenged. The young are born in late spring. They remain in their parents' territory for their first 3 years. Like the ibex, marmots were also in great demand by folk medicine. By 1800 they too were almost extinct. Now, thousands of marmots live within the borders of the national park. Only when the snow begins to melt does the bridal veil near Kals carry enough water to deserve its name. The Maiden's Leap near Heiligenblut got its name from a Catholic legend. A young maiden ran for her honor. To escape her pursuer, she leapt down the waterfall. Kind spirits, perhaps even the Virgin Mary, caught her and carried her safely to the valley. The larch trees are beginning to flower. Together with the stone pine, the larch forms the upper timberline in the Alps. The larch is especially frost-hardy because it is the only conifer that loses its needles in winter. The new needles come out in late spring to avoid the frost. Larch trees flower for the first time when they are 30 to 60 years old. Their seeds are spread widely by the wind. Nature's unusual variety and splendor around Glockner is said to have a special reason. During the night, the mountain sends its breath over all living creatures. This is a saxifrage, a flower typical for the high Alps. It is the exclusive diet of the caterpillar of the most beautiful butterfly that lives at this height, the petite Apollon. The caterpillar hatches from an egg laid directly on its preferred food plant. All that remains for the caterpillar to do is to eat and to grow. After 1 month it is fully grown and begins to cover itself in a cocoon. The cocoon consists of fine silk. Within a few weeks the caterpillar will turn into a butterfly. The torrents of spring are thundering down in the Dorfer Valley. It is the beginning of a long journey with the remote Black Sea as its destination. The Dorfer Lake, cold, grayish-green beauty. Untamed, the river rushes through Dorfer Canyon, a natural barrier between the Dorfer Valley and the village of Kals. This scenic jewel was to disappear under the foundations of a 650-foot concrete dam. In a 1987 referendum, the villagers protested against the gigantomanic project. The eagle mother has made a kill. In winter, eagles mainly live on carrion from avalanche victims. In summer, they mostly hunt marmots. The prey is torn up in the nest. The nestlings are fighting for their food. What looks like harmless play often leads to dramatic consequences. Whenever an eagle mother cannot catch enough prey, she feeds only the stronger of the two. The weaker one is pushed ever closer to the edge until it falls from the nest. The smaller of the two nestlings is still covered in its white baby fluff, while the older bird has its top feathers almost complete. Above the Pastetza glacier, just opposite the Glockner's north face, is a special corrie, a hollow filled with wind-blown sand. The southern lee side of this hollow creates a special microclimate and turns it into an El Dorado for botanists. This limited area is far drier, warmer and calmer than is to be expected at that altitude. Some of the plants that grow here are only found in similar locations in the Arctic and Central Asia. This is also the habitat of a rare grasshopper. It's about 1 inch in length. Its only other habitats are in Scandinavia and Siberia. This is the strictly protected inner zone of the national park, an area where the edelweiss and rare orchids flower. This butterfly is one of the many insect species in the Alps that have hardly been noticed by scientists. It has only recently been discovered. As far as we know, it is endemic above the timber line in the Glockner and Venediger area. A few grassy slopes further, we meet an acquaintance. A petite Apollon has crept from its pupa. After a metamorphosis of 3 weeks, the young butterfly is preparing for its first flight. Its delicate wings are membranes stretched over a stiffened network of blood vessels. The wings are covered by tiny scales with glowing, vivid colors. The young Apollon is testing its proboscis. The Apollon only lives along alpine streams where it can not only find its special diet but also a mate. There is no foreplay. The Apollon grabs the female with its hind legs and makes it compliant. The wind is mostly a northwesterly one. This marmot lives away from the tourist paths in a special protection area. Robust lichens and mosses can create patterns of a bizarre beauty. Again, the mountain's magic breath is felt. The eagle mother takes care of the young. To safeguard against unsuccessful hunting days, she's made a meat deposit a few hundred yards from the nest. The young never drink water. Their supply of liquid is limited to what they get from meat. Leftovers decay in the nest and attract flies and other insects. Only large pieces are removed by the mother. The history of Glockner is also the history of attempts to cross it. Since days immemorial, wanderers and merchants have traversed the Alps. These people are wanderers with a spiritual goal, participating in a traditional pilgrimage from Salzburg to the Corinthian village of Heiligenblut. Inhabitants of these mountains have practiced this custom for 700 years, supplicating for posterity, protection from pestilence, or against the dangers of the mountain. The pass over the Hochtor has been in use for at least 2,000 years, as Roman finds indicate. In the Middle Ages, miners dug here for gold. Across the Alps there was much profitable trade. Wine went north from Italy. Salt went the other way from Salzburg. This is the new Glockner High Alpine Road. When plans for its construction were presented in the 1920s, the project was received with much mockery. Building a major route through the high Alps seemed impossible. Then, as a measure against mass unemployment, the road was built. 4 years after the first blast, Franz Wallach, the road's architect, was the first man to cross the Glockner Massif in an automobile. The Edelweiss Spitze, another prominent peak, could now be reached on wheels. On August 3rd, 1935, the Austrian president officially opened the Glockner Alpine Road. On the very next day, there was a motor race on the Glockner Road. Since then, the road has been modernized, widened and straightened in various stages. Year after year, it attracts more than 1 million visitors, or 270,000 vehicles in less than 6 months. On peak days, 15,000 visitors come here. The ideal construction of the Glockner Road has given many people an impressive insight into this alpine landscape. Sometimes even monuments need an overhaul. The cross marking Glockner's peak had been erected in 1880 in memory of the Austrian emperors and the empress's silver wedding anniversary. Mountain guides from Kals carried its pieces up to the peak and assembled it there. 120 years later, its anchors and inscriptions needed to be restored. This time, the cross was airlifted. "200 years after the first man set foot on the summit, every Austrian alpinist is still driven by a desire to get a close-up view of the Glockner Cross. In the high Alps, the weather can change in no time at all. The Glockner is a massive obstacle in the path of the weather. Within minutes, a storm can strike. The temperature drops suddenly, and then the mountain itself begins to fall apart. Tons of rock bombard a snowfield. Once upon a time, the devil wanted to climb to the peak, but he couldn't find the way. His anger is expressed in hellish storms of fire. Soon after, there is peace again, as if nothing at all had happened. The storm has claimed its victims. For the eagle mother, this is food. The young ones are waiting in the nest. She hardly keeps anything for herself. During the final days of July, the elder of the nestlings is ready to venture out. The younger one is not ready yet. He still needs his mother. But for him too, the days in the nest will soon be over. In a short while he will have to fend for himself, even though he still appears clumsy. This is Austria's largest glacier, 6 miles long with a surface area of 7 square miles and a maximum thickness of 800 feet of ice. The gigantic dimension of this icy landscape becomes visible only when humans enter the scene. The Pastetse Glacier, too, is surrounded by legends. According to one, green pastures used to be where its icy snout is now. The peasants living here reaped great wealth from these rich pastures, and they became arrogant and wasteful. They played with pins of cheese and balls of butter. To punish them, ice and snow filled the valley. The frivolous peasants were turned into rocks and still stand here as witnesses to their evil deeds. It is a fact, however, that this glacier is melting. Since 1850, when it had reached its maximum dimension, its length has shrunk by 1.5 miles and its surface area by 3 square miles. In a few decades, it may have withdrawn to the so-called horseshoe seracs. The fact that glaciers melt away may be spectacular, but it's not unusual. Since the end of the last ice age, some 10,000 years ago, the Pastetse was smaller than it is now at several stages, but it also reached the same climax it had in the 1850s several times. The ice is continuously flowing at a speed that changes from age to age. To the human eye, its rhythms and cycles are not visible. Now the time has come for the younger eagle too. Its mother is approaching, but she has nothing to eat. Only a branch to cover the feces in the nest. Then she leaves the excited young bird to its own devices. This is Glockner's west face, its difficult side. Here it resisted human invasion longer than in the southeast, where in 1800, on July the 28th, 5 mountaineers climbed to the top for the first time. They triggered off a race for the most difficult routes, and it's still going on today. On the traditional routes, the traffic can be heavy when the weather is fine. The Black Mountains attraction for alpinists of any rank remains unabated. With a depth of 1,800 feet and a gradient of 55 degrees, the notorious Pallavicini couloir drops down to the Glockner-Corrie Glacier. It is named after Alfred, Count Pallavicini. Together with 3 guides, he was the first to negotiate the dangerous route in 1876. All day long, the couloir is bombarded by falling rocks. 10 years later, Pallavicini fell from the Glockner face and froze to death at the foot of the couloir that was to bear his name. Glockner had been his life's obsession. The stronger of the two young eagles has begun to succeed in its independent life. The younger one, too, has left the nest for good. Now it has to find its own territory. Eagles need much space. An eagle's territory averages 16 square miles. The siblings will probably never meet again. In the beginning, all the Glockner routes started at Heiligenblut. 50 years after the first ascent, the path on the Tyrolean side also became attractive. It leads via Stüdelhütte, a high mountain refuge. Mountain guide Tony Glieber is taking this route. The Tyrolean village of Kals entered a competition with Heiligenblut, vying for the better route to the top. Sepp Lackner is taking the other traditional route from Heiligenblut. He will soon reach the cabin where climbers spend the night before the final ascent, Eagle's Rest as it's called, at 12,000 feet above sea level. Here the two mountain guides meet. They will make the final ascent together.
Kann nicht schöner sein. Heute müssen wir rein.
Tomorrow, early in the morning, they will start. First, they will have to cross a level stretch of fern. Then comes the Kleinglockner, a minor peak. Then they'll pass through the Glockner Scharte, a narrow wind gap, before climbing the actual summit. Both men have been up there hundreds of times, but this will be their first time together. Now they will spend the night in Austria's highest bedroom. It's a fantastic night. In this night, the Glockner's secret can be felt. The black crystal hidden in its depth. They leave the Eagle's Rest while it is still dark. The brightness of the snow is enough to see and walk by. They climb up a short, steep ascent and cross over to the first rock to Kleinglockner. Then dawn begins to break, the first yellow light. Before sunrise, they reach the Kleinglockner. With the experience of countless tours, they pass the most dangerous passage, the Glockner Scharte wind gap. On both sides there are sheer drops of several thousand feet. They get past Kleinglockner and pass the wind gap. For the next 100 feet or so, they can't yet see the cross on the summit. But standing there and seeing the first sun rays in the east and the sun coming up can be a wonderful and fascinating experience. Such an experience only few people have. For many alpinists, the cross on Glockner is probably the most beautiful summit cross in the entire world. The two men have arrived at the summit. Together, Sepp Lackner and Tony Glieber will spend the day on Austria's highest peak. The two men had never met before, although the summit of Glockner had often been their destination. Long ago, in younger days, the Black Mountain had become their destiny. To both men, the most magnificent view they have enjoyed in their lives has been the view from this very spot. Looking down from above the clouds on a sea of summits and crests like storm waves of stone. Only from up here, where the clouds and the glaciers meet, can one begin to feel the meaning of Glockner's mystery. The black crystal said to be hidden in its depth, the gemstone that touches our hearts with its magic, is Glockner itself, the Black Mountain.